A pretty big jump from 100% no gore from Fallout and Fallout 2, but it doesn't stop there. 6% of the locations have only skulls or skeletons, but no bodies, like the flooded Metro Raider camp, and around 11% of Raider locations have outright or suspected cannibalism, like the Bethesda ruins. Todd. An entire quarter, 25% of locations seem to use bodies and gore as intimidation, like the Raider farmhouse, and finally, an incredible 42% can't seem to be explained in any other way than outright sadism or chem-induced psychosis, like the SATCOM array and N03D. Now, these percentages won't add up exactly to 100% because there can be some overlap, particularly with the suspected cannibalism and something else like intimidation. They can both be simultaneously true. The pit was counted as one Raider location for the purposes of this video because they are all led by one leader and are one homogeneous group. We see another huge change when we go to the next game, Fallout New Vegas, where out of the 24 locations that are owned or associated with Raider groups like the Jackals, the Vipers, or the Great Khans, only one single location has any gore whatsoever. The entrance to Vault 3, which is the home base of the Fiends, a truly violent and sadistic group that seem to be primarily driven by chems and just pure desperation. The bodies are hung up high and include the bodies of both Raiders and Wastelanders, judging by the armor and the clothing, meaning that it was probably meant to be for all of those that approach the vault. It itself has a bunch of blood inside, but bodies and gore are conspicuously absent. We're back on the East Coast. Similar to Fallout 3, but not quite as extreme. There are more total locations at 46, and as a disclaimer, Nuka World was considered 4 locations, since the 3 Raider groups are so distinct from each other that they differ in whether or not they engage in gruesome displays, and the 4th location is the conflict that all the Raiders share between races, which includes all other parts of Nuka World under control. Just under half of the locations, 48% to be exact, no gore, skulls, or skeletons at all, like the Omega Assembly Plant. 11% of locations have skulls, skeletons, threat of the USS Riptide, and 4% of locations indicate cannibalism, like the Twin Glories. Only 17% seem to use bodies as a form of intimidation, like the Harbor Master Hotel, with the rest, which is around 26%, seemingly only explained by sadistic practices, like the Revere Beach Metro Station. The final game, Fallout 76, is Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, but has an interesting added element. Among the bodies and heads that can be found in the forged, heads and bodies can be found. I want to discuss these implications just a bit later, but as far as the numbers go, 11% had no gore or skeletons like the ammo dump. The next section is usually skulls or skeletons, but I'm going to expand it in this case to include scorched only heads or bodies as well. So long as there are no human remains, they're counted here. 31% of the locations can be explained this way, like the South Cutthroat Camp. 8% of the locations seem to have some connection to cannibalism, the most obvious of them being Bolton Greens, where the notorious gourmand group butchered their victims for consumption. Of the locations that have bodies, 25% seem to fall in the category of intimidation or coercion, leaving 28% of the locations with bodies as being difficult to explain in any other way than sadism gone wild, like at the crater. Quiz time. You better have remembered every single one of those numbers, or I'm gonna fail you just like James failed his child in Fallout 3. Nah, pop quizzes are for chumps, but I did graph the results for Fallout 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76, since Fallout and Fallout 2 are just flat zeros for all these categories, and that's just boring. We can see the big differences easily between the games with this bar graph. We can see New Vegas dominates with the no gore section, although Fallout 4 is also much higher than the other games. Fallout 76 seems to have a lot more of the skulls, skeletons, and scorched than any other game, and for some reason that makes me think of a really metal version of like Bed Bath & Beyond. But you can also see from the graphs that Fallout 3 ranks highest with the sadism. Zooming in on these different categories also helps show the trends as well as small but significant differences. It is interesting that Fallout 76 has the highest number of locations with at least a little gore, as well as having the most bones and or scorched on display. Things turn around though for the most grotesque categories. Fallout 3 has the most potential cannibal raiders, is tied for first place with intimidation, and again has a handy lead for sadistic displays. With the exception of New Vegas, which was developed by Obsidian, Fallout 4 is actually the most tame of the Bethesda titles when it comes to crazy-ass raiders, which is interesting because that game has some of the best examples of just pure savagery. Looking at these results and knowing that Fallout and Fallout 2 were omitted because they would have just been 0 for all these graphs, one thing is clear. The Interplay and Obsidian published games simply do not portray raiders in the same kind of graphic, stomach-churning way. This certainly can be chalked up to game design choices, but it could be argued that it is indicative of the level of progress civilization has made on the West Coast versus the East Coast. On the West Coast, we have emerging states, empires that are expanding and waging war on a scale far larger than on the East Coast, with standing armies and complex logistics. On the East Coast, we have barely anything larger than the largest community, like Diamond City in the Commonwealth and Rivet City in the Capital Wasteland, and people are just barely scraping by. Any attempts to create anything resembling a functional government are stymied or completely prevented. Perhaps this more desperate environment drives individuals to levels of barbarity, savagery, and chem-reliance that brings them to the brink to shed the last vestige of humanity that they had left in their cold and uncaring corner of the world. Is this a decent enough answer to why the East Coast seems to be so much worse? And could this explain why the Capital Wasteland stands out as being so much more sadistic and cannibalistic? Let's revisit that question a little later, because the whole point of this.
The Marines Malevolent. A throwback from the past. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40K